Okay, hello everybody. I think we are live on the Christchurch Orchard Park Facebook page and YouTube page. Once again, it's Tuesday night, it's 7 o'clock. Therefore, it's time for Food for 15, which is basically 15 minutes of food for thought that we want to throw out there, especially in this COVID time when we're all thinking about the biggest questions, or lots of us are thinking about the biggest questions of life and what's going on with COVID. And I'm very excited tonight with this week's subject. We're going to hear the story of Mike. I've got Mike Pickersgill with me tonight. And Mike, how do you feel about being, starting your career as a famous internet star? It's going to start tonight. You feel good about that?
I'm feeling very positive.
Yeah.
About my contribution.
The reality is, at this point, there's probably only a handful of people watching, but people generally join as we go on. But thank you so much for joining. As we kind of, Food for 15 is all about trying to just give people some food for thought on what Christians believe about Jesus, how he's real and relevant. Last week, we had a really interesting one on how we know that Jesus actually really existed and did the things that he really did, and really looking at that realness of Jesus. And tonight, we're probably going to see a bit of the real and relevant as we hear a little bit of your story. So it's a bit of a lighter one, hopefully, tonight. But Mike, you're a mate of mine, and you share the same faith as me in Jesus. You'd call yourself a Christian. You don't come to my church, which is a shame. I'm a bit bitter about that. You've choose to go to another church. But as it happens, I'm right in saying that where our church is, kind of Northall Orchard Park, you kind of you grew up round here, didn't you? Is that right?
Yeah, just off Dayton Park Road.
Yeah.
So like near the Parks Primary School.
Okay, right. So a bit further up from where we are at this end of Hall Road, opposite Thorpe Park.
Yeah.
That's cool. So one of the things I want to ask you is, obviously you would call yourself a Christian now, and we'll get there to in terms of more of what that means. But in terms of your background, did you always believe in a God? Did you believe in kind of anything under the kind of material, physical world around us? Did you think there was anything more to life as you were kind of growing up in Hull?
So I think like growing up in Hull, especially on the estate, I had sort of like an influence from my mum, who was like quite into, like the spiritualist, like medium, psychic sort of thing. So like me and my sister would go with my mum and like even our neighbour, and like just pop off down to like the local medium, and just basically have a night out essentially. And at the time for me it was nice because it got me out of the house, for an evening. And I guess the second train of thought for me then was, I actually did have an inquisitive draw to supernatural, or something other than this life, and actually that inquisitiveness for me drew me right through to actually when I went to university. So I had that same kind of drawing and that same curiosity.
Yeah, that's interesting. It's interesting actually. So me and Emma, I'm from Hull originally, as you know, but we've been in Scarborough. We moved back in September, the worst time in the middle of COVID to Hull. But I remember the first week I was back here working, and I must have had 2 or 3 conversations about the spiritual world, about God. I was like, man, I'm back in Hull, because everyone's talking about ghosts and spiritual things. It's very interesting. So, but for you, you've kind of stayed in Hull, haven't you? So I think you went to Cooper, is that right?
Yeah.
I think that was probably my second choice. I went to Endeavour, but probably my second choice was Cooper.
Rivals.
What's that?
We're rivals then.
Rivals, yeah, exactly. We shouldn't be talking like this. So you went to Cooper, and then so you say that those kind of thoughts were with you right up to uni. And when you got to uni, then did things progress in terms of your thinking, in terms of maybe coming closer to some clearer ideas about what is out there, or what's going on?
Yeah, I think again, in answer to your question, it's probably twofold. When I came to university, for the first time, I was well, I came across other Christians, and I'd never really spoken to a Christian before. I didn't know anybody who was growing up. So here I was face to face with somebody who said, yes, I'm a Christian, I follow Jesus. And they themselves were really convicted. They knew what they believed, and they weren't afraid to share it. And I was like, oh, wow, okay. But then also kind of during that period of being curious, I also kind of went through some like personal trials as well, where really I was just thinking to myself, okay, is this it? You know, is there more? I think being brought to that, to the edge there, where I was thinking, surely, is this it? Is there more? And so kind of bringing us to meeting Christians and feeling, okay, is there more? Where's hope? Those two things coming together, I thought, at that time for me, starting university, were quite key in helping me kind of start to form those thoughts and opinions.
That's interesting. So maybe a little bit of spiritual angst going on, just like, I don't know, I'm calling it that. People can hear your words for what they are. I won't put words in your mouth. But it's interesting you say about the people as well, in terms of like not having met, that's fascinating to me, not having met a Christian, as in lots of people call themselves, but I guess someone that's actually believes this stuff, sold out, and you haven't come across them, which doesn't surprise me, because I remember being in school, and I've come from a family that's probably in the broader picture mostly atheist, but a couple of churchgoers in there. And so probably in my teenage years becoming a Christian, I remember being at school going, as I became a Christian, I'm on my own here. So it doesn't surprise me that you said that. It's sad because it's not true. There's probably Hull is very low on church attendance and stuff, but anyway, that's hopefully beginning to change. Anyway, getting to the point, these people you meet, these Christians, what do they do then? So they meet you with all of this, and I'm sorry, I'm going to call it spiritual angst. It's not that, but you're thinking about stuff. You're asking, where's hope? What do they do as they meet you?
Yeah, so they actually invited me to church because I think they saw that I had questions, and they thought to themselves, okay, let's bring him to a place where he can see what we're talking about being lived out. And so I went along to a church service, first time for me ever, setting foot in a church. So I was feeling pretty anxious because I wasn't quite sure what to expect, but actually blown away by the warmth and the welcome really of people there, really just embracing me and showing me love to a stranger, which was quite incredible for me. But they also invited me onto a course called Identity, which really well explained the Christian faith and structured in such a way that it gave me opportunity to ask my questions. And there I was so surprised by, I guess, the rigor that these people who I didn't know were handling scripture, the Bible, and the way they were talking about their faith and making it sound so alive for me, really, it really surprised me because I just thought the Bible was a book, that you read.
Yeah.
So here it was being spoken about so passionately, and people wanting to change and be transformed.
Yeah. So it's almost like if I was to use our catchphrase, which quite helpfully ties into, because kind of what you've said covers both things really, real and relevant. So you're on this, guess course that gives you these sessions that allow you to ask questions and things, and it is fascinating, isn't it, that the rigor and thought in terms of historical basis, I know, like, you know, you're a sciencey kind of guy, so you're a serious thinker, and people I've come across often just think Christianity isn't for serious thinkers. You know, it's for people that maybe need a crutch, a psychological crutch, or a little help to get them through. Nice thing to believe in, but actually that there's some basis to this, and that people can be, whoa, that's a bit foreign to a lot of people. So I'm really pleased you saw that. And I guess if people want to think a bit more about some of that rigor stuff, last week's session would be a good place to start. We only scratched the surface, but we looked a bit of that. And that's really cool, Mike. You mentioned then, so you get to this point and you're thinking, wow, this is relevant. I can see it in people's lives. It's real. I can begin to go, there's something to this. Earlier on, you talked about the hope that you saw in these Christians. As you came to believe and follow Jesus, what did that hope mean to you? What did that hope actually look like? What does it mean that you now have this kind of hope in your life? How would you describe that?
So if I were to recommend any reading, I would direct you to Mark's Gospel. It is my favorite Gospel, partly because the way it's written, it's very straight shooter. There's no kind of elaborate words, it's straight to the point. And for me, at the time when I was a younger Christian, kind of exploring what the Bible teaches and what it says, I found that very accessible. And what you see in Mark's Gospel is Jesus teaching about the kingdom of God coming. We know that to be him as he reveals himself going through the gospel narrative. But to me, what I was witnessing was God's kingdom entering, punctuating into our world, into reality, seeing these people who I had noticed were living transformed lives, people wanting to be genuinely kind, genuinely loving, genuinely generous with what they've got. And that for me was hope, because what I was looking for was, is there something else? And what Jesus told me was, yes, there is. There's me, and there's life with me after, for eternity. This isn't the end. In fact, it's a journey of transformation. And so people might think that, you know, you're given the past 12 months, people might think, gosh, it seems so hopeless, but it really isn't. That isn't the promise of Jesus that he gives in the gospel. It's one of hope. It's one of look to him and you see eternity with him. And for me, it gives me a new perspective on how I should be living, because I know this isn't it. I know this is temporary. I know my life with him is secure. So I have so much to look forward to, as opposed to thinking that I've got to cram everything in now, you know, and I think that this is my lot when it really isn't.
Yeah. That's class. It's interesting as well. People, when you talk about hope, so hope is about the future, isn't it? And that's massive for us as Christians. And you talked about that, but you also mentioned as well the difference in terms of the hope in this life as well, and that Jesus really does make a difference. And now, and you kind of see that. I often think, I kind of sometimes say to people, you know, so you might be wrestling with, can Jesus be true? But surely as you look at Jesus, and surely as you look at his life and the difference he makes, surely you want this to be true. And surely a lot of people out there may be thinking stuff through about God and Jesus. Well, have a look at him, investigate it, have a look at the difference it makes. The church is not perfect. We don't claim it to be, and we've got our baggage. But the reality is, when people take Jesus seriously, it makes a difference. We want it to be true, and I guess people can then go and work out, like you did. I guess, does it stand up? Is it a solid table? Is it a wobbly table? well, I think people will find it's a solid table. Thanks, Mike, for coming on tonight and just chatting through that. It's great to hear your story. You go to, what church do you go to, Mike?
I go to Christchurch Newland.
Christchurch Newland. I'm at Christchurch Orchard Park, but I guess if people have questions and they want to chat more, get in touch. If you want to hear more about Mike's story and how he got to that place, come on Christchurch Orchard Park website, get in touch with me, and I might be able to put you in touch with Mike at some point. He might not want me to, but you can at least try through me, and I'll act as the bouncer to Mike. But I really appreciate it, mate. And yeah, we'll see you all if you're watching, if you're following along these sessions next week for our next Food for 15.